They say it's not what you know, but who you know. And in the workplace, those relationships that you have, they can be your superpower that really help you and your team succeed. So the question is, how do you build strong, authentic connections? Well, today's guest is here to unpack the secrets to building purposeful community with your team and broader network. Today's guest is David Homan. David is the founder and CEO of Orchestrated Connecting, a global community of connectors, Orchestrated Opportunities, an impact-focused advisory firm, and SOAR CONNECT, a startup focused on the strength of authentic relationships. David hosts a podcast called Orchestrated Relationships, focused on developing relationship value. He has also built a network reaching into the most private and incredible circles globally, while maintaining a code of purposeful community building called Orchestrated Connecting. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now here's my conversation with David. Thank you so much for joining me today, David. Not only am I excited for our conversation, but I consider you a dear friend, and it is so fun to get to interview my friends on the show because you guys are like the most awesome people I know, which is why you're my friend. But also, you have played a really significant role in my life as a business person, as a parent. And so it's just really a pleasure to get to connect with you today here on the show.
I'm so excited to be here finally after being such an avid fan for so many years and talking with you about this since its gestation. So thank you for having me.
Okay, so you have a new book that's coming out. Can you tell us what the book is called? And then what was the premise? Because I've gotten to experience the content of the book in real life. So can you lay it out for us about what the core concepts, the core ideas are?
So the book is called Orchestrating Connection: How to Build Purposeful Community in a Tribal World. And so I'm actually really lucky because all of the stuff that I spew out into this planet through events, podcasts, whatever it might be, my co-author, who's an incredible professor named Noah Askin, really brought home with me into this book, which comes out early August. And so everything comes from, Amy, lived experience. None of these ideas are theoretical or things that if you try, maybe your world will be better. I have seen these principles happen thousands and thousands of times a year to change the way people think about relationship value, how they build relationships at the speed of trust, and most importantly, that balance of how you have to show up and you have to be ready doing the self-work that you need to then understand how that can transfer into a much more intentional and what we were calling purposeful community.
I have been so lucky to be part of the intentional and purposeful community that you have built. And I feel like I can attest to all of the incredible things that happen when people know themselves and they show up ready to contribute and meet incredible people who are also showing up and ready to contribute. So can you unpack a little bit more about what an intentional community is? And then we can kind of get into more of the like self-work pieces and how do you build it?
Sure. So let's start with what it's not, right? Your network, as people call it, how many people could you call upon when your kid was sick? How many people could you call upon when you lose a parent, when you lose a job? When you think about, right, not the people you celebrate life with, but you live life through with, like you and I have with each other, and what is, I think, 16 years of friendship and counting now, maybe more. All of this comes from this idea that if you're going to be intentional in your life, then you want to be surrounded by people who do the same. We'll just take these are statistics that much smarter people than me who are data scientists put out. Mel Robbins had talked about this a lot in many of her podcasts as well, which I am an also avid listener to. I won't tell you who I like better. I just like both of you. Here's this thing, right? So when we grow up, we spend our time around our family unit and the friends that are based on our geography. We have some choice to it, but we don't really have that much choice. We do choose who we spend time with and who we evolve with. But when you think about getting through high school, and for those that go straight into the workforce or into college or university, a whole new friend group appears. Because by 18, you're no longer in touch with your family or those people by 90% or more. By the time you're 25, most of the people you started that journey from around 18 into 25 with are no longer part of your circle either. So who's part of your circle? The people that you work with based on the career that you chose, was handed to you, or you stumbled into, or are figuring out. And then the people that you choose to have around or to keep with it. So we never know. And I was just telling my 8-year-old this last night when he was upset 2 of his best friends are leaving before 3rd grade. And I was like, Max, like, you have a choice to keep in touch with these kids. Technology exists now, so you can message them. You can have me send their parents videos of you. You don't have to go, you're no longer in my classroom, therefore you're no longer a friend. And so when we talk about it being intentional, we have to put it out there that it's our responsibility to be intentional about the people around us, because the other crazy stat is those people, especially those core 5, they shape us. If 3 people are runners and 2 people are not runners, by the end of a duration of that friendship, everyone's more athletic. 4 people are obese and 1 person is not. The unfortunate data shows that in that circle, that 5th person gains more weight. We're not just a composite of who's around us, and therefore that's how life gives us this, lets us deal. The truth is that we have a choice of who we stay around, who sticks around, and how we want them to be around us. And that's what we call how you can orchestrate connection in your life.
Oh my gosh, this is incredibly powerful, especially as we think about being intentional and that it's not just nice to have. It's actually fundamental to who we are and what happens in our lives and how we live our lives and what our values and how we choose, right? Like all of that, it's incredibly powerful, much more so than I even realized. And now I'm thinking through, like, who am I spending my time with? Luckily, people like you.
No, but it's what it is, right? The people you've chosen to interview, the people who told you to go different directions and build a startup instead of do a podcast, like, people generally talk to hear themselves think and to justify what they need, but the core people around you hear you. And that deep listening, that compassionate listening means that they are capable of making suggestions or helping you without it actually benefiting them. And that's when you know that there's a difference in a relationship than something that's just part of your network.
So let's talk for a second then about what do you need to do or what do you need to know about yourself in order to be thoughtful about the kinds of people you want to be surrounded by and the kinds of relationships that you want to invest in. Because it seems like you could just come up with like some random criteria, but I'm guessing there's more sophistication than that.
You have to be passionate about one or many things, and you have to be unafraid to share what that passion is. I was actually guest lecturing for a friend's class a couple months ago. And I took this random group of 8 kids who were the most vocal in the class. And I said to them, what are you passionate about? These kids had been in a class setting with each other for 2 years. And finally, one girl talked about a certain type of anime that she loved. And the straight-laced guy who looked like he'd like play on the basketball team was like, oh my God, you love that too? Didn't have to be what they were going to do in their careers or where they were from. It took something they were passionate about that they spent their time in. Because the point isn't the what, it's that you're spending your time in things that enrich you, that add to the way that you see the world and the way that you see the culture in this world. And the way we combine our understanding of cultures with other people is one of the founding principles of our book and of the methodology from it. This idea that once you see people around you who see the world the way you see it, you no longer feel lonely, and therefore you feel much more purposeful, whatever the passion might be. And so that self-work is not just to get out there and to meet tons of people. It's to be ready for the right meeting by putting your time into the things that you value and then being unafraid to put yourself out there. This is another principle with vulnerability, to say, here is what I care about. Here's what I love. And you know, the world has a lot of people making judgments on all these things. And in some cases, people are just going to be way too dense to get it, even if you think they like you. I'll give you an example. At an event I held a month ago, and I won't say where because the person will know, they were shocked when I said I was a musician and a composer. And I said, I built something called Orchestrated. On my homepage, you can see me play piano. If you Google my name or say to the device to my right that if I speak will turn on that Jeff Bezos built, play the music of David Homan, you'll hear my music. And yet, I'd known that person a decade and they were clueless. So is that on them or is that on me for how I show up and how I live with the things that are my values out there? And the answer is it's on me. It's on you. It's on all of us to be unafraid to embrace who we are and to celebrate it, because we will find other people who celebrate it too.
First of all, I have to give a shout out to your music because it is beautiful, incredible. You're an amazing pianist. So everyone should also just listen to your music. Secondly, I feel like I have recently been leaning into this principle more as well. And I can give a very funny example. So I learned to play D&D last 2 summers ago, and I have kind of been looking for a group, but it's definitely not something that a lot of women my age do. And it's always a little bit weird to like say to someone, I'm looking for a D&D group. Do you happen to know one? Because most people will look at me and they're like, really? That's how you're going to spend your time these days? But yesterday I was at a dinner and I mentioned how I had recently found a group and I was so excited. And one of the other people at the dinner was like, oh my gosh, I've been looking for a group too. And I was like, oh, if I hadn't had the confidence to say like, this is something I'm really excited about right now, and I want to share that with everyone who's sitting here at this table, that connection wouldn't have been made.
That is exactly it. And right, so when I grew up playing D&D my entire childhood with my brother, my best friend, and his brother, you were judged, right? The kids playing. We wouldn't have basements in Florida because they all flood, but like the carport, which is where you did it. But then this thing called Lord of the Rings came out, and this thing called Game of Thrones came out, and now there's Robert Jordan's Wheel of Time. Like, these are mainstream multi-billion-dollar franchises. The entire premise is what D&D is. So what used to be judged is now mainstream, except for you read the Canterbury Tales, right? What is that part of medieval history? It's all so much of what has been in that world of folklore and Dungeons and Dragons. And there's going to be people listening to this who are like, all right. And then they tune out. But the people who stay, like, they're not going to care or not, because they're thinking not about what we said, but what about they should be less afraid to say.
Okay, I want to shift this into the workplace a little bit, because there's part of this, obviously, that is just about getting to know yourself, being unafraid to say what you're passionate about and what you are looking for in the world and what impact you want to have or what changes you want to make or how you want to contribute or whatever it is that gets you lit up. But then we come to the workplace, and there's always this tension between being yourself and being vulnerable and also wanting to like lead appropriately and find the right balance. But in some ways, our team is really just another community that we're a part of, right?
100%. It's another part of our network, but something that can either remain that or become much more of what some people might call a family. Other people just might define it as something that really is their workplace community. But when you think about that self-work, right, everything's about meeting people to build trust. From building trust to have the one thing that you can never do for yourself, which is advocate or champion yourself. The power of the introduction, what is built through relationship trust, drives the entire business world, and it's completely undervalued. Think about people in HR. How do people really get jobs? A friend calls them up and says, Samantha was incredible. You should look at her. And her resume goes to the top. A manager has been lauded and given all these awards, but never gets partner. And then somebody else calls them up and says, hey, you should come over here. Tim, who used to work under you, said you were the best managing partner that firm's ever had. Come over to us. Because we live in this world where there's these pecking orders and the structures are based on seniority, position, obviously success as well. But in the world of management and the world of middle management in particular, you are either rising or falling based on your reputation. And your reputation is what your workplace community around you sees and how they perform with you, how you perform against others, and how you perform with them towards the greater goals, which in most cases is revenue and company success. But take a single world of doing work that involves people and tell me introductions aren't the key part of it. Because once I challenge people on that, most of them go, right, the M&A deal, the opportunity, the relationship with the bank for the loan we just got, the new hire, the summer intern pool, all of it comes from somebody having power and somebody else trusting that person with their relationship.
And even if you look at it internally, right, knowing who to reach out to when you have a question in the marketing team or from the finance team, or who can mentor your team member because they need to develop in this way or they're interested in advancing, and who in the company you can reach out to set that relationship up. Like, it's so powerful. You're totally right that relationships are fundamental to being successful in the workplace, both with your team, but also, in the external, how your team gets its work done or how your business succeeds.
You would ask that question, right? Like, what's the difference, right? So how you show up, it's not just about being yourself. It's not just about being your professional self. It's about being your aspirational self for how you people want to be seen, how you want to be seen, but more than that, how you want to be seen interacting with others. Because you are there to make money. You are there to work towards something hopefully you believe in, or at least believe in profiting from. But these are the people you're going to spend all your time with. These are the people you're going to, after working with them all day, then go out for drinks with. And then the people that you're meeting, some of them are going to leave and go somewhere else. And therefore there was an opportunity to build a relationship before they leave or not. You are investing your time in this, and your time is a currency. Therefore, either you hone it, you sharpen it, and you become great at how you connect with others, or people will connect with others more so than you.
I love this point about when people leave, like, and going back to your anecdote about your son, that like we can still stay in touch with them. I think it's very easy to feel like, oh, somebody left and our relationship was, circumstantial. Simply because they worked here, they worked under me, it was great. And unless you happen to also create this amazing friendship with them, they go and you kind of let them go. But that we can actually be very intentional about maintaining some of those connections that feel meaningful and purposeful.
Don't you value your time? The time you spend with people, the time you spend working with people, with your family business, every part of this comes from the idea that the equation we look at is time or money. And then the thing that I think sits above that I know sits above that, are the relationships. It's what you put all of your time and money into, in the office or out of it.
So if we want to strengthen those relationships, both directly with our own team members, and we, obviously want to show up as our kind of best self, our aspirational self, where do we start? What are your suggestions for what we should be doing to make sure that we are spending our time wisely and we are investing in the right ways?
So for everyone who's a parent or who is an aunt or uncle or whatever to their relatives' kids or their friends' kids, how many times does it ever work when you say to your child, because I told you to? I don't think it's ever worked for me. Has it worked for you? I mean, you got teenagers now, so right, definitely not, right? So why do we think that's the way management should be? I learned this, right, from fortunately working for my mother, who never once told me because I told you to. And I didn't realize how lucky I was from 8 years old on. And I was an 8-year-old doing data entry, which I thought was really hard at the time. Now I realize it gave me every fundamental skill I need to know every part of a job for anyone I am managing. But more than that, right, here's the reason I mentioned this first. Because if people are with you, then they're not against you. If people see the bigger picture, then they will have grace when you make hard decisions. And when you lead with curiosity and vulnerability, which in my mind are two of the core strengths in management and leadership, then when people know what you're going through, you know what they are going through, and you know the why, people will give you more than that, those horrible statistics of like 2 to 4 hours of a workday somebody's functional in the office. Like when I ran a global nonprofit, people were functional to the point where my board and other organizations thought for what we did, I had a staff of 20 and I had a staff of 4, because everyone was, word of the day, intentional, but they knew why. But I approached it with grace. I literally had to yell at one of my staff, not actually yell, because she still is a great friend. I was like, why are you taking a doctor's appointment at 7:30 a.m.? And she goes, because I have to show up at work by 9. I was like, no, schedule the doctor for when you want to see the doctor or when the doctor can see you, and I will work around it no matter what we're doing, because your health comes first. And she was shocked. She'd never heard that in 10 years of working with other people, that your health comes before your job. But I don't know, if I wasn't feeling great, wouldn't you want me to help myself first before I tried to do more? So like, there's like this common sense that like, unless you share where you're coming from, and the manager in particular is curious, then eventually when push comes to shove, you're saying, maybe you got to do this because I told you to. Do it now. And then the result is so much less effective.
There is definitely something that shifts in people when they feel like they're part of it and that you care about them. And the common sense piece of this, right? Like things that seem so obvious to us as managers sometimes, or the things that we feel like we have permission for because we're in a leadership position, does not always trickle down or feel so obvious to our team members. And that's why we have to be so articulate and reinforce and remind, like, yes, your health comes first. Yes, it's okay to do this thing to pick up your child early because they're sick, whatever it might be. We have to be really explicit about that. And that is that human connection and showing like we see you, we care about you, we're invested in you. It's kind of easy sometimes to forget that we have to be overly intentional about those things.
It's easy to forget, but then it's even easier to overstep it, right? You want to lose the respect of the people that work with you and for you, then step into hypocrisy, right? You can't pick up your kid, but I'm leaving early to pick up mine. People make that mistake all the time because once people are seen like they're the other or you're their superior as a human as opposed to as a manager, they will start to undermine and second guess everything that you do. And so to counteract that isn't simply, to be clear, to not act like a hypocrite. It's actually to spend the time to honor and to have graciousness and gratitude for what people are giving you, even if the transaction is they're getting paid to do it. Every board member I had in the nonprofit I ran, when I worked in a huge family office, anyone who would help me, right? There was this incredible guy when I worked running a film company where he was hired to do many other things than help me. But when I had an issue, he had to step in. And I would always say to him, thank you so much for helping me with this. And it was like it was the only time he heard it that week, which not only sucks, right, in the other cultures that he was in, but like, and it just wasn't that it was part of that culture the same way. But then what came out of it more than that was anytime I had to ask for a favor, the call was answered instantly. Because that graciousness I showed him and the gratitude I showed him is infectious. And when people feel like you're honoring them, then they honor you back. Therefore, when you need effectiveness, you need people to work late hours, you need people to think something through on their off time, you need them to give it their all for the time that you're going to give it. Wouldn't you rather have people running and matching you in the race than following behind you as a good leader? Because I would rather have everyone move forward than me move forward, get the credit for it, and everyone else go, all right, well, I guess David got to pick up his kids early today, and I have to sit here till 6.
And you talk about this in the book, too, that there's boundaries that if get crossed, people don't get to be part of the network anymore. People don't get to be part of your community if they are not living up to the expectations. Can you just share a little bit about that for a second?
Let me take that actually to how we know each other, how we met, because I think it's an important example for this. We were introduced through a mutual friend over text on like a hot summer day. I knew your name was Mamie. I didn't know your last name. I didn't know anything about you, but our mutual friend Rochelle said, you should meet Mamie. You texted me, hey, come to Brooklyn. And I never came to Brooklyn for anyone because I lived in Harlem, but like I came for you. It was like 120 degrees and we had iced tea and we sat there and I sat there listening to what you needed, offering help. And then I said, thank you for a meeting. And I said, I'd follow up. And I remember you followed up with this question that was basically like, do you know who I am or what I do or anything? And I was like, yeah, you told me what you care about, what you need. I'm going to help you. And that was the beginning of our friendship. It then continued with like you having me over for several dinners where you only fed me the same meal every time. Even though you're a versatile cook, being somebody who's celiac, you were like, all right, brown rice flour chicken tenders again. And then, obviously, as another fellow parent, I was like, I really love chicken tenders. And I don't like people who pretend they don't, because when my kids don't finish them, that's my exception to fried food. But I led with intention because I didn't have something to gain from you, even though I could have clearly gained much from exploiting that friendship, being in the same philanthropic worlds and everything. And so I mention this because as I built Orchestrated Connecting, and you were one of the first people I invited into this, we were somebody where we clearly defined when we would support each other, when we wouldn't, but it was all based on how we approached action and how we were accountable to that action. And so I don't believe that people should get more than maybe a second chance in actions that they've taken. And I'm not talking about like missing a phone call or missing a meeting. In my community, if you come in, right, and somebody tries to exploit you to get to every person who's incredible and more famous than me, which is every one of the 300 and some that you've interviewed so far, to get you to work through you to get to them, they don't get to be part of this. This is a relationship value exchange. It's not a one-way street. And somebody who doesn't get that when it's laid out clearly in front of them, and now I'm going to say, hey, did you read the book? As part of like the onboarding, how could I not live in a world, especially when I said I hate hypocrisy, where like I don't live to the values in which I espouse other people to in relationship building? So that's a very long-winded way to say I believe that you should be judged by your actions, you should be accountable for them, and you should be celebrated if you maintain positive action. And if you don't, in my network, there's plenty of other networks to belong to, ways to go network and to feel like you can have a purpose. But in my network, it's a network of networks where people have insane connectivity, but everyone values that. And that's the action that we constantly judge people upon.
And the same goes in the workplace, right? We all have to be clear about the expectations and why we're here and how we can show up. And when we all hold ourselves to that same level of accountability, it works. And when people don't, it's your responsibility as a manager to step in and help them change or help them move on because it's not the right place for them.
It's true. But all of this that I mentioned, right? Everyone in my network comes from a workplace. They all run businesses. They're all part of businesses. They're founders. They're investors. They're nonprofit CEOs or development directors. There's a lot of philanthropy in other groups. In my network, they're all an individual. But when they step into their world, in the corporate world or the philanthropic or impact sectors, they're not connectors. Because no one values that world of connection and relationship value to the extent that I or anyone in my network, I know including you, think it should be. So we have to look at how are we valuing people? Are we valuing them, managing them, or valuing them being managed by them? Because it goes both ways with this. Are we valuing the people who always seem to know the right person to call? Are we valuing the person who gets us to that right event where that next client comes? Are we valuing the person who goes, I don't know how to solve this, but my friend Mike built this company and he probably knows, I'll get Mike on a call for 30 minutes. Because that, in terms of management, is something to look for. And in terms of the people working with managers as well, or aspiring to be them, there's a much different relationship with a manager who's a connector and community builder than a manager who is not that type of servant leader, because they are managing you to get somewhere else.
All right, we have to wrap up though. So David, can you tell us about a great manager that you worked for and what made this person such a fabulous boss?
The most fabulous person I ever worked with was my friend Ruby Lerner. And I've worked with some incredible people, but she was the founder and head of the Creative Capital Foundation. And she, thanks to an introduction from my friend Allison, who was the one who hired me to work, and I worked with Allison to run a massive artist retreat. And this was what I thought my life was going to be, working with this incredible foundation. Ruby and I were in a lot of deep plannings around this retreat, which was one of her babies. And the thing that struck me the most is we had several decisions that I was sure, in my infinite wisdom at 25 years old, 3 things were going to go wrong. Now, she knew a little bit about me. She didn't realize I had been doing this since I was 16, even though I only looked 16 when I was 25. But I said to her, this is your show. I respect these decisions. I'm just going to figure out a way around them if they go wrong. And she said, okay. So she gave me the grace to figure out something that was countermanding her decision, because I, as a very new employee, thought it was going to go wrong. All 3 things went wrong. And then my solutions were better than the solution I had suggested at the time. So not only did she rapidly tell me, this is not working out the way we hoped, what can you do? She trusted me in it. And then when we finished this major conference in upstate New York, she was able to say to me, you were right. If I'm ever on my deathbed, I want you to be my proxy. You understood the decisions that needed to be made. She's been a friend since, one of the formative people in me seeing how leadership works, for all the good and bad of what every leader has to be. But she had the grace to let me plan something knowing I thought she was wrong. She had the authority to say, go with it. Then she had the humility to not only say that I had been right, and she's a big deal arts philanthropist and leader. She thanked me for it. And that taught me leadership in a way I hadn't really seen before in my life. And so that I will always be grateful for.
And where can people learn more about you, get a copy of your book and all that good stuff?
I make myself pretty easy to find. I mean, you can literally find my email and contact me, but I always say do it with, again, purpose and intent. So my world, the community I run is called Orchestrated Connecting. So therefore that website, orchestratedconnecting.com. And then the book, which is similarly named, because when you trademark one thing, you're told to keep everything derivative from it. The book, orchestratingconnection.com, gives a little bit about my co-author Noah and myself, some of the press that we have coming up, as well as where to buy the book in advance at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, or fairly soon, your local bookstore.
Fabulous. Thank you again, David. I love getting to talk to you and just get to like peek behind the curtain of this magic community that what feels like magic, but I know actually has a ton of thought and intention behind it. So thanks for coming on and sharing a little with my audience today.
I'm so grateful for being here, and thank you for having me.